I'll never forget the night it all began. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the house quiet except for the slow tick of the old wall clock, when I opened the letter that would change everything. It wasn't the kind of thing you expect to receive from your own wife. Official bank stationery, crisp and cold, spelling out a transfer of every cent I had ever saved. Not just the retirement account, but the land my father had left me, sold off without my knowledge. Her name, printed neatly where mine used to be. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at it. My hands didn't shake, not yet. What struck me most wasn't the money, it was the precision. She hadn't left a trace of accident. Every line of that document told me she'd been planning this for months, maybe years. My wife, the woman who'd shared my bed for 3 decades, had stripped me bare with the patience of a snake shedding its skin. And then, as if that weren't enough, came the second blow. I heard footsteps on the stairs. It was my boy, Daniel. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child caught in a lie, defensive, ashamed, but also hardened. I held the letter up so he could see it. "Do you know anything about this?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. Didn't stumble. He just squared his shoulders and said, "Dad, Mom told me everything. You've been holding us back. It's her money now. She deserves it." My throat went dry. Her money. Deserves it? I wanted to laugh, but no sound came out. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just my wife who had betrayed me. My son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had worked myself to the bone to provide for, had been turned against me. That was the moment I felt something colder than grief settle in my chest. Betrayal is one thing. But betrayal inside your own house, by the people you've sacrificed everything for, that's not something a man can just forgive. And I'll tell you this, so you understand, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply nodded, folded the letter, and slipped it back into the envelope. Because deep down, I already knew what had to come next. This wasn't going to end with them laughing over my grave. The morning after that letter, the house felt different. Not because anything had changed on the surface, the curtains still hung in the same crooked way over the dining room window, the smell of yesterday's coffee lingered faintly in the air, but because I knew now. Once you see the betrayal written in ink, you can't unsee it. Every smile, every word from her mouth feels like theater. She came downstairs humming, wearing that silk robe I bought her for our 25th anniversary, acting as if the world was as it always had been. She kissed my cheek, poured herself a cup of coffee, and asked if I'd remembered to take out the trash. Like nothing had happened. I stared at her and thought, "You think I'm blind?" I didn't say a word. Not yet. Silence has power. I just watched her move, the way she avoided looking directly at me. Then Daniel stumbled in, his hair a mess, scratching at his neck like he used to when he was nervous. But when his eyes met mine, there was something sharp there, like he'd already chosen a side. "Dad," he said, his tone clipped. "We need to talk about selling the cabin." That cabin. My father built it with his own hands, and I had planned to leave it to Daniel one day, thinking he'd carry on the family name there. The idea of it being sold, not passed down, not honored, but sold, made my stomach knot. "Why would we do that?" I asked slowly. "Because it's wasted sitting empty," he replied, his voice too rehearsed. "Mom says we could use the money. It's the smart move." There it was again. Mom says. The boy wasn't speaking for himself anymore. He was repeating lines she'd fed him. I put my mug down and leaned forward. "Son, let me ask you something. Do you think that cabin's just wood and nails? Do you think it's nothing but a piece of property?" He looked away. "I think it's time to move on." And she touched his shoulder like she was proud of him. Like she'd just taught him a lesson about the world, when in truth she'd poisoned him against his own blood. That was the moment I knew her betrayal wasn't about money alone. It was about erasing me. stripping away my legacy, cutting me out of the story of my own family, until the only version left was hers. I excused myself without another word, went upstairs, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were steady. My heart was steady. Because it hit me plain as day, if they wanted war, they were going to get it. But not the kind they expected. See, revenge doesn't come to those who scream and slam doors. It belongs to the man who smiles, nods, and waits for the right moment to strike back. And I had just decided, I was going to strike. 2 days later, I found out just how far they were willing to go. I came home early from the hardware store, carrying a sack of nails and a new lock for the shed. The house was quiet when I pushed the door open, too quiet for mid-afternoon. My boots hadn't even hit the mat before I heard voices from the study. I paused, just outside the door, and pressed my hand against the frame. It was Daniel's voice, low and uncertain. "Mom, I don't like lying to him. He's gonna figure it out sooner or later." Her reply came quick, smooth as oil. "By the time he figures it out, it won't matter. The papers are almost ready. Once the accounts are fully in my name, he can scream all he wants, it won't change a thing." I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed still, every nerve straining to catch each word. "And what about the cabin?" Daniel asked. She laughed, soft, almost pitying. "Your father's too sentimental. He doesn't see it's worth more on the market than in memory. Once it's sold, we'll be done with that place forever." "Mom," Daniel whispered, "what if he cuts me out of the will?" That laugh again, colder this time. "Oh, sweetheart, don't you worry. I've already made sure the will favors us. He doesn't know the lawyer's been working with me. When it's done, everything will pass to us, you and me. He'll have nothing left to cling to." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My own wife, sitting in the next room, speaking like I was already dead. My own son, nodding along like a child who'd been promised candy, not realizing he was handing his soul over piece by piece. I stepped back, careful not to creak the floorboards, and slipped upstairs before they noticed me. My hands were steady, but my thoughts were a storm. That conversation had confirmed what I suspected, they weren't just stealing from me. They were dismantling me, tearing apart every brick of the life I had built, and smiling while they did it. I sat down at the desk in the bedroom, pulled out an old notebook, and started writing. Dates, details, names, every small thing I knew, every habit of theirs, every weakness I'd noticed over the years. I wasn't just a husband or a father anymore. I was an investigator. And as I put pen to paper, one thought kept circling in my head. If they wanted to erase me, then I'd make sure my revenge was written in ink they couldn't wash away. The following Saturday, they made their mistake. She thought I'd gone to the lumber yard, but instead I parked the truck 2 streets over and walked home on foot. I slipped through the side gate and came in by the back porch. From there I could see through the kitchen window. She was at the table, papers spread before her, a glass of wine at her elbow. And Daniel sat across from her, chewing on the end of a pen like he used to during school exams. The papers, my papers, were spread wide, bank statements, the deed to the cabin, even copies of my will. My gut twisted, but I forced myself to keep watching. She pointed with her neatly manicured finger and said, calm as if she were teaching arithmetic. "All of this will be finished once the lawyer files. Then we can move on with our lives without him standing in the way." Daniel frowned. "But what if he finds out before then?" "He won't," she replied, voice flat, confident. "Your father's too trusting. He believes people are who they say they are. He'll never suspect us until it's all done." And then, like the hand of Providence, her phone buzzed on the table. She reached for it, leaving the papers unguarded, and Daniel excused himself to grab a soda from the fridge. In that split second, I saw my chance. I slipped in quietly through the back door, soft as a shadow. Neither of them noticed. My hand brushed over the stack just long enough to slide one sheet free, a copy of a power of attorney document, my forged signature at the bottom. My heart thudded once, hard, and then I was gone, out the door, back into the yard. By the time Daniel returned with his soda, I was halfway down the block. Back in my truck, I read the paper under the weak light of the dashboard. They hadn't just planned to take what was mine, they had already signed me out of my own life. That signature, shaky but convincing, declared me incompetent to handle my own finances. That's when the anger stopped burning and started hardening into something colder. They thought they were clever, but in their arrogance, they'd given me the proof I needed. I didn't call the lawyer. Not yet. I didn't storm into the kitchen and throw the paper in their faces. That would have been exactly what they expected from me. Instead, I folded the document neatly, tucked it into my jacket pocket, and smiled to myself. Let them think they were winning. Let them think I was blind. Because now, I had a weapon of my own. And in time, I'd use it. And when I did, the two of them would never see it coming. They always underestimated the quiet ones. They assumed an old man with hands rough from years of work and a face creased by winters had nothing left but memories. They were wrong. What they missed was the patient part of age, the part that learns to wait, to listen, and to strike when the moment is perfectly soft. I started small, the way a good carpenter starts a repair, unseen, exact, and at the places that hold everything together. First, I walked the house like I'd never walked it before. Not as a man returning after work, but as an intruder learning every squeak, every loose hinge, every place where a paper might be slipped and found. I found the study window that caught light in the morning, the drawer where she kept the tea bags and the receipts, the little envelope Daniel shoved into his wallet that always had $2 and a crumpled lottery stub. Habits are maps, and they drew me everything I needed. Then I began to feed them themselves. A letter appeared on the kitchen table one morning, my handwriting, but not my words. I had practiced that familiar scrawl until it looked like the weathered signature they'd always seen. The note was short, the kind of petty cruelty that makes a house feel like a courtroom. Don't let him sell the cabin. It's the only thing left that matters to you. I left it where Daniel would reach for his cereal. He read it, frowned, and tucked it into his pocket without telling anyone. A week later, I accidentally left a printed bank statement out on the counter. Not a full ledger, mind you, just a highlighted line and a comment in the margin. Are we really sure we want to put everything in her name? Daniel noticed it while making coffee, eyes skimming, then back up to stare at the ceiling like a man who'd been startled awake. He didn't confront her that day, but he watched her more closely. He started asking about our accounts in the evenings, in a way he hadn't before. Each question was a little crack in the plaster. I took care to make nothing too obvious. If I'd stormed into the kitchen and thrown papers in the air, they would have cemented together and pointed at me as the problem. Instead, I let their own fear do the work. People afraid of losing something begin to smell danger everywhere. They start to divide, to protect their little corners. I wanted them to turn and face each other. At night, when the house was ours again, I'd sit in the dark with the old lamp on the side table and rehearse the conversations I wanted to hear. What would happen if Daniel thought his mother was hiding money? What would he do if he believed she planned to cut him out once the cabins and accounts were converted? I didn't have to imagine for long, the human mind fills blanks quicker than any playwright. And fill them they did. It started with a careless phrase from her, overheard when she thought I was asleep. If Daniel wants his share, he'd better be grateful for what I'm doing for him. I let the phrase hang in the air like cigarette smoke. Daniel caught it the next afternoon and asked, dangerously calm, grateful for what, exactly? She coughed and smiled the way a person does when they've been caught stuffing a hand into a cookie jar. For making sure you're not left with nothing. Her voice floated with that practiced innocence she used at the bank. He withdrew, and that was the victory. Pride is brittle in a son who thinks he's been bought. He began to pace more, to argue in private, to keep his phone closer. He stopped helping in the garage. He started dressing sharper, suddenly protective of a future that had always felt assured when he was a child. I gave him reasons to doubt her loyalty, subtle and plausible. A printed email, found on the printer that hinted at a lawyer's visit. A receipt for a private meeting at a town office, left on the kitchen counter beneath the teapot. Nothing I wrote could be traced directly back to me, but everything fit the shape of what he already suspected, that he was being nudged from the stage he'd been born to stand on. Best of all, the two of them began to make the small mistakes of collaborators who don't truly trust each other. She started leaving documents in unlocked drawers. He, in his nervousness, began to speak too loudly about selling the cabin while on a call. Once, Daniel slammed the car door so hard the neighbor's cat darted under a bush, and she flinched as if someone had struck her. Each misstep compounded the other's insecurity. One evening, after they'd gone out to a wine tasting, a thing she took to because it made her feel modern, I returned quietly and moved a single item, the old photo album from the mantel to the study shelf. It revealed, to anyone looking, photographs where Daniel stood beside me on a dock at the cabin, grinning, arm around my shoulders, proof that he had once loved the place for reasons beyond money. He found that album before they left for the lawyer's office the next morning and took it with him. He leafed through the pictures in the car, thumb catching on that sepia smile. I imagined how the memory might fight with the freshly planted suspicion in his head. The knife I was twisting wasn't aimed so much at them as at their certainty. They had always believed the future was theirs, a straight line from their choices to the outcome they wanted. I was turning that line into a rope of knots. And then, finally, on a wet Thursday, the thing I'd been waiting for happened. The lawyer called to confirm an appointment for a signing. They'd decided to move faster than I expected. Haste is the telltale sign of guilt paired with fear. Daniel would be there to sign, and she would present the final papers that day. They planned to close the cabin's listing the next week and hand over the account authorizations. It was the perfect accelerated timeline, reckless, and exactly what I needed. I drove past the courthouse at noon and watched them through the second-story window of the cafe across the street. They were smaller than they seemed from the outside, Daniel's jaw tight, her smile forced. They leaned toward each other and mouthed words I couldn't hear. For a second I thought I saw a flash of doubt in her eyes, like someone catching a reflection and remembering a face. When they came out, Daniel walked ahead of her, shoulders hunched as if he bore a secret weight. She pulled her coat closer and looked around like a woman who has to make sure everyone is watching her play the part she's chosen. They got into the car and drove away, taillights blurring into a smear of red down the avenue. I sat in the cafe until the cup of coffee cooled and went cold. Then I walked home slowly as if I had all the time in the world, because I did. I had planted the seeds and now I would wait to see which way the wind would blow them. I had set them against each other in 1,000 small, invisible ways. Now I would let them begin to harvest their own doubts. And yet, even satisfied and patient, a part of me trembled. There is a thin line between cleverness and cruelty, and on either side of that thread, lives hang. I reminded myself of why I'd started down this road, not for spite alone, but for the preservation of what was mine and what my father had left me. That felt righteous enough to sleep beside. Night closed in. I turned the key at the door and paused with my hand on the knob. In the hall, where the light caught the edge of the stair rail, something slipped from the pocket of my jacket I had folded earlier, a single sheet of paper I hadn't meant to reveal yet. It fluttered to the floor like a small white flag and landed near my slipper. When I bent to pick it up, I saw a note in a handwriting I did not recognize: "If you value what's left of your life, come to the pier at midnight. Alone." I froze with the paper in my fingers, the clock ticking somewhere in the other room. The air in the house seemed to hold its breath. Whoever had written that note knew how to pull me into a corner. Whoever had placed it in my pocket, and why had I placed it there? Had made the rules of engagement suddenly sharper. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, and I thought of the lake, black and patient, waiting for the night. I folded the note, slid it into my pocket, and for the first time since the letter that started this whole thing, I felt the true weight of what I'd provoked. Midnight at the pier. Alone. I could have laughed. I could have called the police. Instead, I sat with the lamp dimmed, listening to the house breathe, and made the decision that would decide everything. Because if a hand was reaching from the dark to shake me, I wanted to be the one to grasp it. The rain came steady that night, fine needles blowing off the lake and pricking my face as I walked down the narrow path to the pier. The boards beneath my boots groaned with every step, as if they resented my weight. Out there, away from the street lamps, the world was nothing but wet blackness and the hollow sound of water lapping the pilings. I carried no lantern. Light makes you a target. Instead, I let my eyes adjust, listening more than seeing. A gull shrieked far off. A car door slammed somewhere in town. But closer, just at the edge of the pier, was a silhouette. Tall, hunched, waiting. "Glad you came," the figure said. A man's voice, low, almost swallowed by the wind. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. He stepped forward, and in the flicker of a passing car's headlights on the road above the lake, I caught his face. The lawyer. Not my lawyer, the one she'd hired. The one I'd never trusted. "I don't have long," he said, glancing back over his shoulder as if the shadows might follow him. "You need to know what's happening. Your wife, she's not stopping at the accounts. She's filed paperwork to have you declared unfit. Mentally incompetent. By the end of the month, she'll own everything, and you won't even have the right to sign your own name." The words hit me like the lake wind, sharp and cold. I already suspected the shape of it, but hearing it out loud made it real. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. His jaw tightened. "Because she promised me a cut. Half, to be exact. But now she's planning to cut me out too. Thinks she doesn't need me anymore. I know when a ship's about to sink, and I'm not going down with it." I stayed silent, watching the man shift nervously, his coat flapping in the wind. "She's meeting with a buyer for the cabin tomorrow," he continued. "Cash deal. Off the books. Once it's signed, that place is gone for good. You'll have nothing to your name. Nothing." For a long moment, all I could hear was the lake slapping wood. Then I said, calm as stone, "And what do you want from me?" He smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Protection. When this blows up, and it will, I don't want to be the one holding the bag. I give you the information, you spare me when the dust settles." I looked at him, the lawyer who had smiled at my wife's jokes, patted Daniel on the back, and shuffled my legacy across his desk like scraps of paper. He thought he was playing both sides. "You're already holding the bag," I said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." His smile faltered. He opened his mouth to speak, but I'd already turned and started walking back down the pier. I didn't need him anymore. His confession had given me more than he realized, it confirmed the timeline. Tomorrow. The cabin. The last piece of ground worth fighting for. As I reached the shore and stepped back onto solid earth, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. And tomorrow, I'd take the first strike. Morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of sky that presses down on a man's shoulders. I didn't shave, didn't change my shirt. I just sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, waiting for the house to stir. They came down together, her in that pale blue blouse she always wore to meetings, Daniel in a pressed shirt he hadn't ironed himself. Their eyes slid past me like I was part of the wallpaper. She buttered toast, humming, while he poured orange juice. "Big day today," she said finally, like she was talking to herself. "Everything's coming together." Daniel nodded, glancing at me as if checking to see if I'd caught it. I kept my eyes on the steam rising from my cup. Let them think I was defeated. Let them believe their secret was still theirs. By noon, they were gone. I waited 5 minutes, then pulled the folded document from my pocket, the one I'd taken that night in the study. The forged power of attorney with my shaky signature. Proof of what they were doing. I slipped it into a manila envelope along with photographs of the cabin, ones of my father and me on the dock, Daniel at 12 holding his first fish, my wife younger, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Evidence of what was being stolen. I drove slow, following the familiar back roads until the pines rose up thick around me. The cabin stood like a sentinel by the lake, shingles worn, porch sagging, but solid in the way only a man's legacy can be. And there they were, her car, Daniel's car, and a shiny black sedan that didn't belong. I parked out of sight and walked the rest of the way, boots quiet on damp earth. Through the window I saw them, my wife at the table with papers spread wide, Daniel leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and a stranger in a suit, the buyer no doubt. They were laughing. Laughing in my father's cabin, with my name on their lips and my history on the table like a cheap trinket. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The laughter died. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, her face pale beneath the powder. Daniel shifted, guilt flickering before he covered it with that hardened mask he'd worn lately. "Dad, you shouldn't." I raised a hand, cutting him off. Then I laid the envelope down on the table, right on top of their papers. The buyer glanced at it, confused, while my wife's eyes narrowed. "What's this supposed to be?" she asked. "Proof," I said evenly. "Proof of forgery. Proof of fraud. Proof of betrayal." The room went still. Daniel's jaw clenched. The buyer shifted uncomfortably, pushing back his chair as if the walls had grown too close. "You think anyone's going to believe you?" she said, voice sharp, but there was a tremor in it now. "You're an old man. Confused. That's the whole basis of this." She stopped short, realizing too late what she'd just confessed in front of a stranger. I smiled, small and tight. "Exactly." The buyer stood, gathering his briefcase. "I don't know what this is, but I'm not getting involved. Good luck sorting out your family matters." He walked out, boots thudding across the porch. A car door slammed. The engine roared to life and faded down the dirt road. Silence filled the cabin, heavy as the storm clouds outside. Daniel looked from me to her, then back again. "Mom," he said slowly, "is it true?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. And in that moment, I knew the crack I'd been waiting for had finally opened. The silence inside that cabin was worse than any scream. The wind rattled the loose pane in the kitchen window, and the old clock above the mantel ticked once, loud as a gunshot. Daniel stared at her like he'd never seen her before. "Is it true?" he asked again, his voice quieter now. She turned to him, hands trembling as she reached for the papers. "Danny, listen to me. Your father doesn't understand. He's confused." "He's not." "Stop," I cut in, my voice sharp enough to slice through the air. "Don't lie to him. He's a man now, not a boy you can feed fairy tales." Daniel's eyes flicked to me, then back to her. He wanted her to deny it. He wanted her to give him some clean truth he could hold on to. But she couldn't. Not anymore. Finally, she sank into the chair, her face folding in on itself. "I did it for us," she whispered. "For you, Daniel. He never trusted me to manage what was ours. Always clutching, always holding back. I just wanted what we deserved." "No," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "You wanted what you deserved. Don't drag me into it." Her mouth opened, closed, but nothing came out. The cabin seemed to shrink around us, walls pressing tighter, air growing heavier. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope again, laying the forged document flat on the table. "This is fraud. It's a felony. And if I walk into the sheriff's office with this, they'll come knocking before dinner." Her eyes went wide. "You wouldn't." Oh, I would, I said calmly. But I don't need to. Because the damage is already done. You've lost the buyer. You've lost the boy's trust. And you've lost me. Daniel's breathing was ragged, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. For the first time since this all began, I saw the son I used to know, the one who used to run down to the dock at sunrise, calling for me to come see the fish jumping. He looked at me with shame, but also with something like apology. Dad, he said hoarsely, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know it was this far. I nodded once. I didn't have to say the rest. He understood, he'd chosen wrong, but he still had time to choose again. As for her, she sat there staring at the papers, the little empire she tried to build crumbling before her eyes. The woman I'd once loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone hollowed out by greed. I stood, my chair scraping against the wood. This cabin stays in my name. The accounts, what's left of them, stay with me. You'll walk away with nothing but what you carried into this marriage. And if you so much as touch a pen in my name again, I'll bury you under the weight of the law. She looked up at me, tears streaking the powder on her cheeks. You can't just walk away from me like this. I leaned close, my voice a whisper meant only for her. You walked away first. Then I turned and walked out into the rain. Daniel followed, steps heavy behind me. We didn't speak all the way back to town. That night, I sat on the porch of my own house, listening to the crickets and the steady drip of rain from the gutters. My legacy was bruised but not broken. The boy might still find his way back. And her, she was gone, even if she still breathed. I thought of my father, of his calloused hands on mine as we hammered boards at the cabin, his voice steady as he told me, what's worth keeping, son, you protect with everything you have. Even if it costs you. I understood him now. And though the war in my house had ended, the scar would always remain. Betrayal cuts deep, but survival cuts deeper.